The avoidant person who pushed you away, who treated you poorly, who employed their defensive patterns without regard for how those patterns hurt you, is now experiencing profound destruction of their life in ways they cannot ignore and cannot escape. Not dramatic external destruction necessarily, not complete collapse of career or finances or social standing, but internal psychological destruction and relational destruction and existential destruction that makes their life feel empty, meaningless, unbearable in ways it never felt before they lost you. And this destruction is directly traceable to their mistreatment of you, to their patterns that drove away the one person who understood them and accepted them and created conditions where their life felt bearable despite their wounds. The destruction manifests as pervasive loneliness that nothing alleviates, as recognition that every subsequent relationship falls painfully short of what they had with you, as inability to feel genuine joy or engagement with life without you in it, as constant awareness that they destroyed the best thing they ever had and cannot get it back, as realization that their defensive patterns that they thought protected them actually isolated them in prison of their own making, as understanding that you weren't just a romantic partner, but were a person who made their life livable and whose absence has revealed how empty and how painful their defended existence actually is. They look at their life now and see wreckage. They're more isolated than they've ever been. They're stuck in patterns they cannot escape. They're comparing everyone and everything to you and finding reality devastatingly lacking. They're unable to move forward because they're trapped in regret about past. They're experiencing their defended independence not as freedom, but as loneliness. So profound it feels like punishment. They're recognizing that what they thought was self-protection was actually self-destruction. That pushing you away was a catastrophic mistake that destroyed not just relationship, but destroyed their capacity for peace, for connection, for anything resembling happiness. The destruction is not temporary consequence that will fade with time, but is permanent alteration of their life's trajectory, permanent loss that cannot be replaced or repaired, permanent recognition that they will carry what they did to you and what they lost in losing you for the rest of their lives, that they destroyed something irreplaceable during period when they had access to it and cannot go back and make different choices that would prevent the destruction they're now living with every single day. The specific ways their life unraveled after losing you. The avoidant person's life didn't collapse in obvious external ways, but unraveled in profound internal and relational ways that make their existence feel destroyed, even when external markers of life might appear intact. Understanding the specific manifestations of this destruction reveals how losing you created cascading failures across multiple domains of their life and their well-being. Their life unraveled through isolation that deepened dramatically after losing you, as they discovered that you were the main connection preventing them from complete loneliness. While you were in their life, the avoidant had at least one meaningful connection, one person who knew them, one relationship that provided some buffer against isolation. They might have had other friends or family connections, but these were typically more superficial, more defended, less intimate. When they lost you, they lost the one person who truly saw them, and the loss revealed how isolated they actually were beneath the surface relationships they maintained. Without you, they recognized they had no one who really knew them, no one they could be vulnerable with, no one who understood their wounds and their patterns. This recognition of their profound isolation created spiral, where their loneliness made them more defended, which made connection with others more difficult, which increased their isolation further, creating cycle of increasing loneliness they cannot break. Their life unraveled through inability to form meaningful new relationships, as they discovered everyone fell devastatingly short of what you provided. The avoidant tried to move on, tried to date, tried to find new connections. But every person was measured against you and found lacking. No one understood them like you did. No one accepted their patterns like you did. No one created the same depth or the same safety. The comparisons were constant and were always unfavorable to new people, making it impossible to genuinely invest in new relationships because they were always aware these people weren't you, weren't as good, weren't creating what you created. This inability to connect meaningfully with others trapped them in a state where they were lonely, but unable to address the loneliness. Through new relationships, stuck wanting connection, but finding every connection inadequate compared to the standard you set. Their life unraveled through loss of meaning and purpose that you had provided without them recognizing it until you were gone. The avoidant discovered that you had given their life meaning in ways they didn't appreciate while you were present. You gave them reason to try to be better. You gave them someone to share experiences with, which made experiences meaningful. You gave them feeling of mattering to someone, which created sense of purpose. Without you, they found their life felt empty and meaningless. Work felt pointless. Social activities felt hollow. Achievements felt unsatisfying. They were going through motions of life without the animating force that you provided, and this lack of meaning created existential emptiness where nothing felt worth doing because nothing created the feeling of significance that your presence and your care had created. Their life unraveled through inability to experience joy or pleasure in things that previously brought satisfaction. The avoidant found that activities they used to enjoy, hobbies, social events, achievements, pleasures, no longer provided satisfaction. Everything was colored by your absence, by their regret, by the comparison between life with you and life without you. They might go through motions of engaging with life, but they weren't feeling genuine joy or pleasure. The emotional flatness, the inability to feel good about anything, created depression-like state where life felt gray and empty, where nothing could penetrate the fog of regret and loss they were living in. Their life unraveled through increased reliance on avoidant patterns that intensified their isolation rather than protecting them. After losing you, the avoidant retreated further into their defensive patterns, more withdrawal, more emotional unavailability, more defended independence. But these patterns that they thought would protect them or bring relief actually made things worse. The more they withdrew, the more isolated they became. The more emotionally unavailable they were, the less possibility there was for connection that might alleviate their loneliness. The more they defended their independence, the more alone they felt. Their patterns intensified in response to the pain of losing you, but the intensification created more pain rather than less, trapping them in a cycle where their defenses were destroying their life, while they continued to rely on those same defenses because they had no other coping mechanisms. Their life unraveled through deterioration of their mental and emotional health, experiencing depression, anxiety, or emotional dysregulation they couldn't previously manage or hide. The loss of you, the recognition of what they'd done, the inability to alleviate their loneliness, all of this took toll on their mental health. They might have experienced depression they couldn't shake, anxiety they couldn't manage, emotional instability they couldn't hide. Where you had provided stabilizing force in their life, emotional anchor that helped regulate their system, your absence left them unmoored and emotionally dysregulated. They might have needed therapy or medication, might have struggled to function at work or in social contexts, might have had friends or family notice something was wrong. The deterioration was evidence that you weren't just a romantic partner, but were crucial support for their psychological functioning. Their life unraveled through trapped feeling, where they recognized they destroyed their best option but couldn't undo it and couldn't move forward. The avoidant found themselves stuck in an impossible position. They recognized losing you was a catastrophic mistake. They wanted to undo it, but couldn't, because you were gone and unavailable. They couldn't move forward with their life, because everything felt inadequate compared to what they lost. This stuck state created paralysis, where they weren't moving forward, weren't addressing their patterns, weren't building new life, but were simply existing in state of regret and longing for past they couldn't reclaim. The trapped feeling made every day feel like punishment, like serving sentence for their mistakes without possibility of parole or redemption. Their life unraveled through social consequences as friends or family recognized their role in the relationship's failure and lost respect for them. People who knew both of you, who saw how you treated them versus how they treated you, recognized the disparity. They might have confronted the avoidant about their behavior, expressed disappointment in how they treated you, taken your side in the breakup. This loss of respect from others compounded the avoidant's internal destruction with external social consequences, with damaged relationships with friends or family, with reputation harm among people who mattered to them. They faced not just internal consequences of their patterns, but also external social consequences that made their isolation more complete and their regret more public. How they recognize your absence created the destruction they're experiencing. The avoidant person eventually recognizes through painful experience and growing awareness that the destruction they're experiencing is directly caused by your absence and by their role in creating that absence through their mistreatment of you. Understanding how they make this connection reveals both their growing self-awareness and the inescapability of the consequences they're facing. They recognize your absence created the destruction through contrast between how their life felt with you versus how it feels without you, seeing clearly now what you provided that made their life bearable. The avoidant compares their emotional state when you were in their life. They had someone to share with, they felt less lonely, they had reason to try, they experienced moments of genuine happiness. Life felt more meaningful to their emotional state now. Profound loneliness, inability to connect, lack of motivation, pervasive emptiness, meaninglessness. This contrast is undeniable and reveals that you weren't just person in their life, but were person who made their life feel livable. The destruction they're experiencing correlates directly with your absence, proving causation between losing you and their current devastation. They recognize your absence created the destruction through attempts to replace what you provided and discovering it's irreplaceable, forcing acknowledgement that the specific person they lost was crucial to their well-being. The avoidant tried to find what you gave them in other relationships, in friendships, in activities, in their defended independence. But nothing worked. No one provided what you provided. Nothing filled the void you left. This failure to replace what you gave forced recognition that you, specifically, not just any relationship or any person, were what made their life work. The destruction exists because you specifically are absent, because what you specifically provided cannot be found elsewhere, because they destroyed relationship with irreplaceable person and are now experiencing irreplaceable loss. They recognize your absence created the destruction through their patterns, intensifying without you as moderating force, revealing you are containing their worst tendencies. The avoidant notices that their patterns, their withdrawal, their emotional unavailability, their isolation, are worse now than they were when you were in their life. They recognize that your presence, your gentle challenge to their patterns, your pull toward connection despite their defenses, was actually moderating force that prevented their patterns from completely taking over their life. Without you, without that moderating influence, their patterns have run wild, intensified, become more destructive. This recognition that you were helping contain their dysfunction proves that losing you removed crucial protective factor that was preventing their life from unraveling as completely as it has. They recognize your absence created the destruction through inability to sustain meaning or purpose without you, as witness and as person who cared about their growth and well-being. The avoidant realizes that doing things, achieving things, growing in any way felt meaningful when you were there to witness it, to care about it, to celebrate it with them. They tried to better themselves, to pursue goals, to engage with life without you there. But it felt pointless because you weren't there to share it with, weren't there to care about their progress. This recognition that you gave their efforts meaning, that your caring about them motivated their efforts to be better, reveals that you were providing purpose, that your absence has removed, creating destruction of their motivation and their engagement with life. They recognize your absence created the destruction through experiencing their defended independence as prison rather than freedom, proving your presence was making their defended life tolerable. The avoidant thought, pushing you away would give them freedom, would allow them to be independent without the pressure of relationship. But what they discovered was that their independence without you felt like isolation, felt like prison, felt like punishment, rather than liberation. They recognized that you were making their defended existence bearable, were providing connection that gave their independence breathing room, were making their life feel like choice rather than like lonely prison sentence. The destruction of this recognition that what they thought would free them actually imprisoned them is devastating because it proves they were completely wrong about what they needed. They recognize your absence created the destruction through others, pointing out the change in them, the deterioration observable to people who knew them before and after losing you. Friends or family comment that they're different now, that they seem depressed or withdrawn or not themselves, that something is clearly wrong. These external observations confirm what they're experiencing internally. They're not the same. They're diminished. They're damaged by the loss. The external validation of internal experience forces recognition that the change in their life, the destruction of their well-being, coincides with and is caused by losing you. That observers can see the correlation between your absence and their deterioration. They recognize your absence created the destruction through specific triggers that remind them of you and reveal the depth of the hole your absence created in their life. Certain songs, certain places, certain experiences trigger intense awareness of your absence and intense longing for what they lost. These triggers reveal that you are woven into their life in thousands of small ways, that your absence isn't just abstract loss, but is concrete, specific, constant absence from moments and experiences that you should be sharing with them. The pervasiveness of these reminders forces recognition that you weren't peripheral to their life, but were central to it, and your absence has destroyed centrality and meaning of their daily experience. They recognize your absence created the destruction through their inability to escape thoughts of you and regret about losing you, recognizing that their obsessive preoccupation is evidence of how crucial you were. The avoidant thinks about you constantly, replaying what happened, imagining what could have been different, longing for what they lost. This constant preoccupation proves you weren't just another person they dated, but were a person who mattered profoundly, person whose absence dominates their psychological landscape. The inability to move on, the constant thinking about you, is itself a form of destruction. They cannot be present in their life because they're trapped in past with you, and this trapped state is destroying their capacity to build any kind of future. Why the destruction feels irreversible and inescapable to them. The avoidant person experiences the destruction of their life not as temporary setback that will improve with time, but as irreversible damage and inescapable consequence that they will carry permanently. Understanding why the destruction feels permanent reveals both the depth of their loss and the realistic assessment that some consequences cannot be undone. The destruction feels irreversible because the specific person they lost, you, is irreplaceable, and they recognize they will never find equivalent connection or equivalent person. The avoidant understands that you are a unique combination of qualities. You saw them deeply. You accepted their patterns while maintaining boundaries. You created safety they haven't found. Elsewhere, you understood them in ways others don't. This specific combination cannot be replicated. Other people might have some of these qualities, but not the specific combination that made you special. The recognition that you're irreplaceable means the destruction caused by losing you cannot be reversed by finding someone else, cannot be fixed by new relationship, cannot be undone, because what was lost was one of a kind and is permanently gone. The destruction feels irreversible because they cannot undo their treatment of you, cannot go back and make different choices, leaving them with permanent record of failure and permanent guilt. If the avoidant could go back and treat you better, could redo the relationship with their current awareness, they might be able to reverse the destruction, but they can't. The past is fixed. How they treated you is permanent reality. The choices they made that drove you away are unchangeable. This permanence of their mistakes means the destruction caused by those mistakes is also permanent. They will always carry the guilt of having mistreated you, will always live with knowledge of their failure, will always have this relationship as example of their worst selves destroying their best option. The destruction feels irreversible because you're unavailable to them. You've moved on or established firm boundaries, making restoration of what was lost impossible. The avoidant might want to reconnect, might want to apologize, might want to try again with their new awareness, but you're not available. You've moved on with your life. You've established no contact. You've made clear you're not interested in reconciliation. This unavailability makes the destruction irreversible because even if they changed, even if they developed capacity they lacked before, they cannot apply this change to relationship with you because you're gone and not coming back. The opportunity to be with you is permanently closed, making the loss permanent. The destruction feels irreversible because their patterns that caused the loss remain unchanged, proving they'd likely repeat same mistakes even if given another chance. The avoidant recognizes they haven't fundamentally changed. They still have same attachment patterns, same defensive structures, same intimacy anxiety, same tendency to withdraw. This recognition that they're fundamentally the same person who destroyed relationship with you creates hopelessness, where they see themselves as doomed to repeat same patterns, as incapable of the change that would be required to have different outcome. The destruction feels permanent because they are permanent in their patterns, unlikely to develop capacity that relationship would require. The destruction feels irreversible because time since losing you hasn't healed the wound, but has made it worse, proving this isn't temporary pain, but is lasting damage. The avoidant might have expected that with time, they'd feel better. They'd move on. The pain would fade. They'd accept the loss. But instead, time has made things worse. They miss you more as time passes. Their regret intensifies rather than fading. Their recognition of what they lost grows clearer rather than dimming. This pattern where time makes things worse rather than better proves this isn't temporary setback that will resolve, but is permanent damage that will persist, possibly for the rest of their life. The irreversibility is confirmed by time's failure to heal, The destruction feels irreversible because it's destroyed their capacity to hope or to believe good things can happen for them, creating self-fulfilling prophecy of continued destruction. The avoidant's loss of you has damaged their ability to hope for happiness or for positive outcomes. They believe they destroyed their one chance, that nothing will ever be as good, that they don't deserve good things anyway after what they did. This hopelessness creates self-fulfilling prophecy where they cannot pursue new connections or new possibilities with genuine openness because they don't believe anything good will come of it. The destruction thus becomes irreversible because their response to initial destruction is to give up hope, which prevents any possibility of building something new that might alleviate the destruction. The destruction feels irreversible because it exists at identity level, changing how they see themselves in ways that cannot be unchanged by new information. The avoidance loss of you has changed their fundamental self-understanding. They see themselves now as person who destroyed best thing they ever had, as person whose patterns ruin what matters most, as person incapable of sustaining what they most need, as person who fails at love and connection. This identity level change cannot be easily reversed by future successes or by new relationships because it's integrated into their core sense of self. Even if they had positive relationship in future, they'd still be person who destroyed relationship with you, would still carry that identity and that failure as part of who they are. The destruction feels inescapable because it's internal and psychological rather than external and circumstantial, meaning they carry it with them everywhere and cannot leave it behind. If the destruction were external, job loss, financial problems, social consequences, the avoidant might be able to escape it by changing circumstances, moving locations, starting fresh somewhere new. But the destruction is internal. It's loneliness, regret, guilt, self-hatred, inability to connect, lack of meaning. These internal states travel with them wherever they go, persist regardless of external changes, cannot be escaped through geographical moves or circumstantial changes. The inescapability comes from the fact that they are the source of their own suffering. They carry the destruction inside themselves, and they cannot run from themselves. What their destruction means for you and your path forward. The avoidant person's life being destroyed as consequence of mistreating you has specific implications for how you understand what happened and for how you proceed with your own healing and your own life. Understanding what their destruction means ensures you're interpreting it correctly and using this information in ways that serve you rather than keeping you entangled with their suffering. Their destruction means your perception of the relationship's importance was accurate, that this was significant connection for both of you, despite their inability to honor that significance. The magnitude of their destruction, the depth of their suffering, the permanence of their loss, validates that the relationship mattered profoundly, that you weren't imagining the significance, that the connection was real and deep for both parties, even if only one party, you, was capable of honoring it appropriately. This validation helps your healing by confirming your reality and by proving that what you invested in was genuine and valuable, not illusion or one-sided fantasy. Their destruction means the consequences of their patterns are real and severe, validating that your refusal to accept their treatment was appropriate self-protection. The fact that losing you destroyed their life proves that their patterns have real costs, that refusing to accept their treatment was legitimate choice, that your boundaries and your decision to leave were appropriate responses to treatment that was genuinely harmful. This validation supports your confidence in your choices and in your boundaries, proving that you were right to protect yourself, even if they didn't believe at the time that their behavior warranted the consequences you implemented. Their destruction means you were providing more value and more stability to their life than they recognized or appreciated, confirming the asymmetry, where you gave far more than you received. The degree to which their life fell apart without you reveals how much you were providing: emotional support, meaning, purpose, moderation of their patterns, connection that made their life bearable. This confirmation of your value and your contributions helps your healing by proving that you were the more valuable party in the relationship, that you weren't inadequate or insufficient, that their inability to treat you well was profound failure on their part given what you were providing. However, their destruction does not mean you're responsible for saving them or for alleviating their suffering by returning to a relationship that hurt you. The most important boundary to maintain is recognizing that their destruction, while directly caused by losing you, is consequence of their own choices and patterns, and is theirs to sit with and potentially learn from. You didn't destroy their life. They destroyed their life by mistreating you and driving you away. Their suffering is not your problem to solve. Your responsibility is to yourself, to your healing, to building life that serves you, not to sacrificing yourself to save someone from consequences of their own patterns. Their destruction does not mean you should feel guilty for enforcing boundaries or for moving on with your life, as their suffering is appropriate consequence rather than unjust punishment. Some people might try to make you feel guilty. Look what you've done to them. They're suffering because you left. Don't you care that they're in pain? But their suffering is not unjust consequence of cruel choice on your part. It's appropriate, natural consequence of their patterns and their choices. They mistreated you. You protected yourself by leaving. They're experiencing consequences. This sequence is correct and healthy. Their suffering, while real, is teaching them lesson they needed to learn about how their patterns destroy what they value. Their destruction does not mean they've changed or developed capacity to be different if given another chance, as suffering alone doesn't create transformation without sustained work. The avoidant is suffering tremendously, but suffering doesn't automatically equal growth or change capacity. Many people suffer without learning, suffer without changing, suffer without developing new capacities. If the avoidant reaches out, claiming they've changed, claiming their suffering has taught them, claiming they can be different now, this claim should be met with extreme skepticism unless backed by sustained evidence of therapeutic work, behavioral change across multiple contexts over significant time, and developed capacities that didn't exist before. Suffering alone is not sufficient evidence of transformation. Their destruction means they will likely carry you as significant person and significant loss for the rest of their life, but this permanent significance doesn't create obligation for you to remain accessible. You will be person they think about, person they regret losing, person they measure others against, person who represents important lesson and important loss in their life story. This permanence in their psychological landscape might feel validating, might confirm your significance, but it creates no responsibility for you to maintain any form of relationship with them, to help them process their loss, to be available as person they think about and long for. Their permanent carrying of you is their burden and their consequence, not your responsibility. Their destruction ultimately means that mistreating someone who offered them genuine care and understanding had catastrophic consequences, teaching lesson about how defensive patterns destroy exactly what's needed for healing and happiness. The destruction of the avoidance life is object lesson in how patterns designed to protect actually destroy, how defending against intimacy creates the isolation and loneliness that's far more painful than vulnerability would have been, how pushing away someone who offered genuine love leads to permanent loss that cannot be replaced or repaired. This lesson is theirs to learn from. Whether they use the destruction as motivation to seek help, to address their patterns, to develop different capacities is entirely their choice. Many avoidants experience this destruction and don't change. They remain stuck in their suffering. They repeat patterns with new people. They continue destroying relationships until they die lonely and full of regret. Some avoidants use the destruction as rock bottom that finally motivates genuine change. They seek intensive therapy. They do the deep work on their attachment wounds. They develop capacities they lacked before. Which path the avoidant who mistreated you takes is not your concern and not your responsibility. Your path is forward toward your own healing and your own life, building toward relationships where you're honored and cherished rather than mistreated, where your care is reciprocated rather than taken for granted, where your presence enhances someone's life in ways they recognize and appreciate in real time rather than in retrospect after destroying the relationship through their patterns. Let them sit with the destroyed life they created through mistreating you. Let them learn or not learn from the consequences they're experiencing, and you move forward, free from their destruction, free from responsibility for their suffering, free to build beautiful life where you're treated with the care and consistency you deserved from them, but can find elsewhere with people capable of recognizing your value while they still have access to you, rather than only after they've lost you forever.